Hey guys, so I just wanted to come in and have a quick little chat with you about the solar eclipse that's happening tomorrow. And it should be starting sometime just afternoon Central Time, and it'll be going on until about 3, but you're really only going to see totality kind of right in the middle of that. The sweet spot's going to be right around 145-ish. 147 is about where it should hit if you are in Cedar Park, Texas. So I want to go over a quick bit of safety with you because you're going to see all kinds of cool stuff. And if you want, you can ask questions about it later. I'd happy to tell you. But before the eclipse happens, I really want to make sure that everybody is being safe because you only get one set of eyes and you want to keep them in as good shape as possible. So, eclipse safety, do not look. I know it is tempting. The sun is up there. It's doing all kinds of weird stuff. Just don't do it. Don't look, not even a little bit, not even a glance. You should just never look without eye protection. It can cause severe damage. If you look over here, these are some retinal burns that somebody had, and you can see that they are actually in the shape, excuse me, of a crescent moon. So that was an eclipse burn. Um, if you are going to look up at the sun, you absolutely need to use eclipse glasses, and they need to meet the worldwide standard. It's known as ISO 12312-2, and it should be advertised or marketed. You should see a symbol like this. See that ISO up there? That means that they are approved for this particular use, and in no way, shape, or form are sunglasses a replacement for a pair of approved eclipse glasses. They just really don't have the ray blocking power to protect your eyes. The only time that it is safe to view the eclipse is right at the moment of totality. And the reason that it's safe at that time is because the moon is pretty much completely blocking the sun. So the rays just aren't coming. All right. So if there's no rays, they can't burn your eyes. The rest of the time, even if part of the moon is over the sun, even if it's partially blocked, even if it's mostly blocked, it is just not safe. Um, so honestly, in my opinion, even when we're at totality, just don't risk it. Like if you look up there and then there's any light coming down, turn away. Um, if you do not have appropriate eye protection, though, you can still watch the eclipse, and I'm going to show you how. Some of these are really, really simple. Some of them are a little more complicated. Some of them are very complicated. So here we go. But keep in mind, I'm going to tell you these ways of viewing the eclipse. These do not allow you to look up into the sky. None of these viewers allow you to look at the sun. They allow you to see a projection of the light. Okay. And when you're seeing a projection of the light, it's cut down on the total amount of rays enough that it is safe for you. And then you can go ahead and look at the image. So it's kind of like looking at a photograph or a lower impact version. All right. So the other thing, just don't look. Don't look at the sun during eclipse. Just don't do it. Keep in mind that no matter how powerful, how smart, how respected somebody is, even if a teacher is staring up at the sun and going, "Wow, that's really cool." Even if somebody in a position of authority while you're out there looking at the eclipse, they're looking up, don't do it. It's just not worth it. You need your eyeballs. Those are important. All right. So for kids, the first thing is if you actually have a pair of eclipse glasses, that's phenomenal. If you are concerned that somebody that you're watching the eclipse with is going to take a look, so this could be little kids, it could be really exuberant adults. We might want to put some on some of our politicians or some of our principals or some of our teachers. I don't know. So what you can do is you can create a shield. You take a paper plate, you trace the eclipse glasses on so that you know where you have to make holes. And then you go ahead and you put little slices there so you can get the eclipse glasses in. So what you need to do is make sure that those holes are smaller than the shield around the edge of the eclipse glasses, okay? So this thing needs to overlap the plate, and then you can cut a little triangle out for your nose so that you can actually get it on your face. If you want, you can decorate it. If you don't want to, at least you're safe from the eclipse. Tape the glasses in place so the whole thing doesn't fall apart. Off you go. If it turns out the plate is loose because it's kind of a, you've got a small head, Just tie some string to the plate, put it on like it's tiger mask, and you are good to go. All right. The next option is to use a pinhole camera. And the pinhole cameras all kind of work on the same idea. It limits the light, so the smaller the hole you have, the crisper the image will be up to a point. At that point, no light is getting through, or very little light is getting through, so it's not as good. So when the light is limited by the eclipse, it allows the eclipse to cast some shadows, and then those shadows represent the shape of the eclipse. So you can actually see it happening, though generally it will reverse itself because of the way the pinhole camera works. So you'll see things in the opposite direction than the original source. Um, so what you want to do here, let's
Solar eclipses tend to be pretty big news. The 2017 one in North America was hugely memorable for millions of people, including the SciShow team. And the 2019 one in South America was equally amazing and Instagram worthy. But during those events, the sky isn't the only thing people were looking at. They were also fascinated by these crescent shaped lights that appeared on the ground, most noticeably underneath trees. The
I
lights are
really
one of
like
the most
SciShow. I
fun
think they're
parts of
great.
any solar eclipse, and the science behind them is pretty good too. The biggest thing causing these lights is called the pinhole camera effect. Like the name says, it was originally used to describe pinhole cameras, which work by letting light through a tiny hole in a screen. But the same physics applies when light from an eclipse passes through the spaces between tree leaves. On the most basic level, light comes from the sun, passes through those gaps, and then hits a projection surface, usually the ground. But the important part is that not every ray of light is able to pass through. The only rays that reach to the ground are the ones angled in just the right way to make it through the spaces between the leaves. And much of that light takes a very specific path. It starts from one side of the sun, travels through the gap in the leaves, and hits the other side of the projection surface. So the light that comes from the left side of the sun ends up on the right side of the patch of ground, and vice versa. This creates an image of the sun that's both upside down and backward. And it's why those little blobs of light look so much like the solar eclipse happening way up in the sky. They're tiny images of the eclipse itself. Technically, this means you can observe this phenomenon regardless of whether an eclipse is happening or not. It's just that the sun, without the moon in front of it, looks like a circle. So its projected image is just a circle. Pretty nondescript. It's only once the moon starts getting in the way that things become all interesting and pretty. The cool thing about these images isn't just their shape, though. It's also the fact that they're really crisp and clear. Like, look at these lights compared to the blobs you normally see underneath trees. The normal lights are fuzzy, while the eclipse ones are sharp little moon-shaped things. That happens for at least two additional reasons. One is that there's less ambient light during an eclipse. Normally, sunlight gets refracted and bounces around in our upper atmosphere. That gives the sky its nice blue glow, but that glow is another source of illumination, which makes the lights and shadows we see pretty fuzzy. As the solar eclipse approaches totality and the moon moves completely in front of the sun, that additional glow is dramatically reduced. That means you don't get as much interference, so you get much cleaner photo-worthy images. The other reason these things get so sharp close to totality is because the visible portion of the sun becomes narrower. Normally, the sharpness of a shadow depends on how far away you are from a light source. If you're really close to it, the shadow will be sharper, and if you're farther away, it'll be more fuzzy. But changing the size of the light source can have the same effect. When you decrease the size of your light source relative to the thing that's casting a shadow, like by covering up part of the sun, the shadows change. The ratio of things that are totally in shadow versus only partly in shadow increases. And that gives those eclipse lights on the ground sharper edges. So the next time you're experiencing a solar eclipse, take some time to look down. There's a lot that those funny looking lights can teach you. And hey, if you're not willing to wait for the next eclipse, you're not out of luck. At night, LED streetlights shining through tree leaves can project some pretty cool pinhole images too. So ultimately, solar eclipses are cool in a lot of ways, but in this case, they help highlight some of the amazing phenomena that surround us all the time. I hope you get a chance to check out these amazing shadows the next time you experience a solar eclipse, especially since looking at shadows is a
So
great way to see what's
absolutely
happening without
check out
looking at the sun.
SciShow.
Because,
They
in
have
case
some
you've
really
forgotten,
great
that's a
videos.
really bad idea.
All right. So, um, there's a lot of ways to alternately view. So the first is that you can look at the ground through the tree leaves. You can also use your fingers. So if you make, well, you can't see me. If you make a mesh of your fingers, you're going to create some holes. So the smaller those holes are between your fingers, the easier it is. You don't even need trees. For safety, have your back to the sun, put your hands out in front of you, and look at the ground. So you should not ever be looking up. Um, as they said, if you have some trees around, you can look at the shadows. These were actually taken, I took these photos. They were taken in Cedar Park, Texas during a partial eclipse in October 2023. And what happens is that the leaves, as they said, the leaves act as a filter and the crescents of light will appear in the light filtering through the leaves, and you'll be able to see the progress of the eclipse without ever having to look up at the sun. Your eyes will stay safe. Another thing that you can do is go find a colander or a basket or some other type of object that has small holes in it already. So the holes in that behave as a pinhole and they refine the light and the crescents will appear. And actually you'll get many, many, many images all lined up. They can look really cool. This was my basket and it ended up working pretty well. This one was just not quite working right for me, but um, play with it and see what you can come up with. If you want, you can actually have 2 or 3 different ones and see which one works the best. So another experiment that you can do is if you have um, a sizer, they have had sizes of all different size holes, you can see which pinhole makes the best image for you. So as you can see down here, as you get through the really small pinholes, you don't see much at all, right? There's not enough light getting through to really give you an image, and as it starts getting larger, it gets very blurry. So this is kind of right in the ideal range. So you can try this out yourself by making different sized holes in the pinhole viewer that you make, or by finding something like this and holding it up and seeing what it casts on the ground. If you feel like getting really involved, you can create a do-it-yourself pinhole viewer. And essentially, that has 3 pieces, right? You need something to block the sun, a small hole, and somewhere to view it. So it can be as simple as grabbing a piece of paper and putting a hole in the middle, and you're out viewing it on the sidewalk, or you can get more complicated from there. In a lot of the pinhole viewers that are made, they use tinfoil because that allows you to make a very small, very precise hole. But poking a hole in a piece of paper or a cardboard box is just fine too. So slightly harder is to do a pinhole viewer in a box, and that means you're going to assemble the whole thing inside of the box. It'll be 1 unit, but you have to find the box and you have to start taping things together. So it's a little harder than stabbing a hole through a piece of paper. So what you're going to do is you're going to put a hole in there where the sunlight can pass through, and you're going to have a viewing area on the other side. Now, some people prefer to stick their head into a very large box. You might want to see if you can get an Amazon box for that. You can use a cardboard shoebox. You can use a cereal box. Any of those will work. Uh, for optimum safety, what you want to do is you want to put the pinhole here and put your viewing port right at the same place. So when you are looking in, you are not tempted to stare back up at the sun, right? You want to be looking in away from the direction that the sun is coming. So the sun comes in, you've got your back to it, you look in, and you're going to see the image on the other side of the box. Okay. Another way that you can do it is you can grab a roll. So that can be a toilet paper roll, a paper towel roll, any kind of roll that you've got. Sometimes you get the really solid ones. Those are a little harder because you got to figure out how to cut through them. I've tried it and I just ended up crushing the roll. So you want to find something that you can cut through relatively easily. And what you're going to do is you're going to put tin foil or some kind of a cover or closure on one end and poke a hole through, and then make an area that you can look in and view it. And ideally, for the best viewing, you want to put something white inside so that you can see really well, or you can just set it on a piece of white paper and leave the end open. Either is fine, but the whole idea is going to be that you're going to let those rays come in and cast on the other end. And then, so this is the boss mode because you've got to do a lot of taping and a lot of assembling. And over here, this is crafty mom mode. This is probably the hardest mode there is of creating an eclipse viewer. This is exactly the same way you're going to do it with a long tube, but what you want to do is to take some coordinated paper. You need it to be thematic in order for this to be a defeated level. You cannot do it without the thematic paper. You wrap that around and then off you go. You're ready to view the eclipse. So, will you see the eclipse? I don't know. It depends where you're sitting. And what you're going to find out is that much of the US is going to experience at least some degree, some partiality of the eclipse. But the main eclipse is going to roll through a very distinct path, and it tends to shift from time to time. So, we've had a number of eclipses in the US, visible from the US, and they occur approximately every 18 months. Some are in other countries, some are over the United States, some are over the ocean, so nobody sees them. Um, but this one coming up today, the next eclipse that's visible in the United States is predicted for somewhere in the vicinity of 2044 or 2045, depending on where you're sitting. So you should make an effort to see this one because it's not going to roll around in this country again for quite some time. And if you are looking, right, this is where the United States is going to be able to observe the eclipse. This is the path of totality here. So that in that range, people will see a complete solar eclipse. And where I'm sitting here in Cedar Park, Texas, just north of Austin, we're going to have about a minute and a half or 2 minutes of totality. Um, and there are a chance to see the eclipse even if you're other places. Partial totality is visible almost everywhere in the United States. So in this red zone here, that's where you're going to see 80% or greater. So that's going to be a pretty good eclipse. And as you move further out, yellow is about 60 to 79%, and blue is 40 to 60%. So here you're still getting a little bit. By the time you get out here to the far edges in green, you're really only seeing like less than 40%. So here you'll still be able to see that something's kind of happening to the sun, but it's really not going to be a profound effect. So that's what you can expect. I know a lot of people who've traveled to my town to see it because they are interested in seeing totality, and I really expect that it will be a really profound experience. So while you're out there, make sure that you are being safe, make sure that you are watching for all the phenomenon because it's really cool. It's a really cool thing to be able to see. And this is extraordinary. So you owe it to yourself to get out there. And the last thing is watch the animals and the birds. We, even humans, but also animals exist on a circadian rhythm, and they expect to do certain things at certain times of day, and their behaviors are affected by the levels of light, and that affects their circadian rhythms. So as the light dims or brightens, they engage in certain behaviors. But when the eclipse happens, all of a sudden the light is dimming at a time that they don't expect, and then they think that the light is out, and then the light comes flying back on, and it's very confusing. So a lot of times you can see animals and even plants engaging in some really unique behavior. So keep an eye out for that as well. I hope you really enjoy the eclipse, and I'll talk to you soon.